We got a big update from IDIS over on Reset Era about when we can expect statements from the CMA and that document. It's going to be next week, and it's going to potentially cause some issues for Microsoft with the Activision Blizzard deal. In addition to that, we also got an update on the documents that are being requested of Sony, quantity and some details. So let's dive into everything right now so that we're all caught up going into next week. So first things first, there are a bunch of reports coming from Equity Report. Here is what IDIS is saying. The most important one says the CMA is likely to publish provisional findings on Microsoft Activision Blizzard merger by next week. This is coming via IDIS on Reset Era, and it is behind a paywall over on equityreport.co.uk. IDIS says one of the lawyers says that he was aware that the CMA had received a significant number of complaints, although he could not confirm the names of the complaints involved. Now, these first quotes I'm actually reading are from, let me see the date here. These are from earlier in the case because there have been several statements made, and this was from December 14th. So let's continue on reading the quotes from that one, and then we'll get to the more modern ones. Both lawyers thought that the agreements with Nintendo and Steam for COD wouldn't be enough for the CMA because historically the CMA has not been supportive of behavioral remedies. One of the lawyers thought that there was a chance higher than 50% of the deal being blocked by the CMA. He also said that the EC and CMA had been most likely cooperating and that whatever happens, the decision would be similar. So just a reminder, whatever the CMA says next week, that's likely what the EU is going to go with. And it will also have impacts on the FTC case. Now, if this goes through easy peasy for Microsoft, or they're able to address the statement of objections in a way that makes both the CMA and the EU happy, I have to imagine everything else sort of falls into place at that point. It would be hard to imagine that all of a sudden the whole thing falls apart after the big places, so to speak, agree to terms. Anyway, let's continue on. So both lawyers thought that Microsoft could appease regulators by agreeing to licensing Activision Blizzard games on FRAND terms, fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory, but that such an agreement would be commercially unattractive for Microsoft, and it's difficult to monitor. Now that's going to be interesting. Will Microsoft games continue to publish on the PlayStation platform? That might be one of the concessions that Microsoft ends up having to make. That would mean that games like Diablo would be secured, Crash Bandicoot would be secured for PlayStation fans in the near future. And the Activision deal could end up looking a lot more positive to PlayStation fans because the only change would be that Microsoft owns those properties. So continuing on, there were some other things. These are the more modern findings, right? Provisional findings from the CMA coming next week, right? The sources, two lawyers linked to the parties or third parties, say that Microsoft is waiting for the provisional findings before offering remedies. And just a reminder, that's kind of what we have expected this entire time. We always thought that Microsoft would be waiting to hear what they said before they offered concessions. The CMA is very hard to read at the moment, and Microsoft will probably learn about what's happening at the same time as everybody else. The outcome of the provisional findings could depend on whether they include the ecosystem theory of harm or not, and stuff like Game Pass, etc. If the CMA blocks the deal, they'll need to back up its claims with substantive oh, that's a tough word, sorry, evidence from third parties to defend its position in a possible appeal. So whatever the CMA says, it's coming with a whole lot of evidence. And that's why that document could be up to 400 pages long. Speaking of a long time, if you've watched this long and you're one of the 50% of people who aren't subscribed, you should hit that subscribe button, hit that bell, help me hit that goal of hitting 100,000 subscribers. And thank you for helping me hit that goal and for watching this content. Going on to quote 3. A third source, another lawyer linked to the case, believes that the deal shouldn't be opposed, but that aligning remedies between the CMA and the EC will be a challenge because the CMA has a more formal approach and the EU process is more interactive. The same lawyer believes that the regulator's position about the case is a combination of the vocal opposition from a competitor, Sony. And you know what? Sony has been really going hard with the EU and the CMA trying to get them to block this deal. So I don't think that's that far-fetched. And some overreactions over the last 10 years where vertical mergers have been constantly approved. It's odd that it even got this far, she says. So what they're saying is that these vertical mergers have just been going through. And this seems to be the one where they're like, well, hold up. Let's actually really look at this and see if it will be negatively impacting consumers. Sony may have been rejecting the offers from Microsoft, hoping to secure better licensing terms through a formal remedy agreement. I've said Sony doesn't really have another play here, right? Sony's going to keep hamming up the Call of Duty angle because at the end of the day, they're probably going to get the best deal possible if they continue approaching it from that position. And Sony's already been doing quite well for themselves. If we look at those reports, we can check out the reports about their earnings, which just were through the roof last quarter. So if they can get an even better deal out of this Activision thing, good for them. So does this mean it's set at the CMA? That's what Sullivan over on Reset Era asked to IDIS. IDIS said, no, I don't think so. The CMA being against behavioral remedies is nothing new, and the deal being blocked is definitely possible after the decision from phase 1. That shouldn't be a surprise. But this could still be approved without remedies. From a legal perspective, it makes more sense than it seems. It could be approved with structural remedies. In that case, it will depend on the willingness of Microsoft Activision Blizzard, or maybe they'll surprise us with some very specific behavioral remedy. I don't know why those random characters pasted there anyway. In any case, the report is almost 2 months old and before the time extension. In fact, the report from yesterday says no one really knows what's going on with the CMA. I think that the new info about multiple companies being against the deal is very interesting because so far only Sony, Google, and maybe Nvidia, but not explicitly, have appeared as opposing parties. But it looks like there are more. So potentially we could be getting a bombshell where tons of people are against this deal in the industry, and we're going to have all of that revealed to us quite soon, actually. He continues on. Let's see here. And, oh yeah, so we got some details about what documents Microsoft is requesting from Sony in a different case. Let me just make sure I didn't hit the wrong button there. Yeah, so it looks like there are going to be more, lots of drama. Now let's talk about the documents that Microsoft is requesting Sony. If you remember, Sony was subpoenaed by Microsoft. They want 45 distinct document requests. They've requested 45 distinct documents, 13 of which have multiple subparts, for a total of more than 120 separate document requests. Oh my goodness. So I have a 400-page CMA thing to read over. Got a big party coming up on the Destin channel where I read a bunch of legal documents. Anyway, these requests demand all documents related to nearly all aspects of SIE's business, as well as extensive sets of sales, financial, and personal user data. Example, user date of birth, user country, user gender, covering what will likely be millions of users. Microsoft said, all right, Sony, we're going to subpoena you, and we want as much data as we can possibly get out of you. Because we want to, they can do so much with that information. Like, that's the kind of information companies sell to each other. Anyway, 10 of these requests seek materials going back more than 11 years to January 2012. When you make a claim like Call of Duty's been hugely important to PlayStation, okay, prove it. We need all this data to prove your claims. Otherwise, they're not going to hold up in court. Sony estimates that providing the response to Microsoft will cost approximately, can I turn off my camera? I actually can't see it. Let's see here. $2 million or more in fees and expenses, and demand weeks of intense work and substantial efforts and involvement of SIE personnel. You want to tie up Microsoft with every legislative branch in the world? Microsoft's going to do a little bit to mess with you too. It's all sort of part of this game. Like, look, when Microsoft has been doing the super campy stuff, like the tweets about PlayStation is the first of us. Oh my goodness. And the tweets yesterday, I roll my eyes at them. But when PlayStation does the same thing, I roll my eyes at PlayStation. So now you're getting a little bit of a taste of your own medicine. And I think I have one more quote. Microsoft is requesting all documents related to performance reviews and evaluations of all Sony gaming leadership or management, all documents relating to SIE's gaming business sent to, receive from, or exchange with other Sony entities, and executed copies of every content licensing agreement SIE has entered into with any third-party publisher over the past 11 years, among others. Oh my goodness. We could learn about the Sony behind closed doors deals with Square for Final Fantasy, and anything that's happened with any of those properties and how much they're paying for things, because the FTC makes a lot of those documents public. They'll be redacted, but it's going to be very interesting. Wow. Sony is not happy with the unrealistically short deadlines and irrelevant requests from Microsoft. In any case, Sony anticipates that this will be its last request for an extension to the motion to quash deadline, and that they will either reach final agreement or narrow any impasse by February 10th, 2023. Microsoft disagrees with the relief requested in this motion. Wow. Okay. So I didn't read any of that. I just made the graphic right before I did the show. So that's some really interesting stuff. Sony went to the FTC, they went to Washington, and now Microsoft's like, okay, if those are your statements, we need proof, because this is going to court now. So it's within their right to ask a witness to provide proof of that. Otherwise, it's just hearsay, and it'll get thrown out of the court. So all of Sony's work could be moot if that happens. At least that's what I imagine would happen. I would have to ask a more professional lawyer. But if somebody says something and they have nothing to back it up, then that's a little bit harder to bring in as evidence, and it will be easier for their lawyers to squash. Hey, thank you so much for watching. Seriously, if you're one of the 50% of people who aren't subscribed, please consider hitting that subscribe button, hitting that bell. That was much more exciting than I thought it would be. If you are a member, thank you. Thank you so much for supporting this channel. I hope you like the videos without any ads. I post all these without ads for y'all. You can support at whatever level you like for that. Just click that join button right down there. I'm going to get out of here, but if you want to see the tweets yesterday and my reaction to them and Sony's earnings, you can check that out right here, and I'll catch you for the next one. Bye for now, everybody.